Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us for Arkansans Ask. For the next 60 minutes, the Honorable Asa Hutchinson, the 46th elected governor of the state of Arkansas, will be our guest, taking questions from the audience, from a live audience, and a couple perhaps from the moderator. Sir, you become the 5th consecutive governor of Arkansas to engage in these little colloquies with the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. It's a great tradition that you have here at AETN, and I'm delighted to participate in it and glad to have the opportunity.
We need to run through some numbers very quickly to let our audience know exactly how they can get their questions through. Operator standing by now, courtesy of the Arkansas State Employees Association, manning the telephones. It's a toll-free call, 1-800-662-2386. Email questions are equally acceptable. paffairs@aetn.org. And beginning tonight, Twitter messages, or questions I should say, via Twitter are being taken. And that is at AETN, hashtag ARAsk. And that'll be superimposed, I think, on your screen as we go along. And with that, sir, again, welcome. You are just out of a session. Everyone escaped alive. Are you satisfied overall? You've got practically everything you asked for.
I'm very, very satisfied. I'm so impressed with the legislators and how committed they were to getting the job done quickly, efficiently, and then going home. It was an 81-day session, which is one of the shortest ones that we've had in recent decades anyway. And then the agenda was full, and what I campaigned on, what I've advocated for, what people expected from me as governor, we've been able to accomplish. Obviously, the legislators had a lot of things they worked on, and we've still got 100 bills to review before I finish, but it's been a very good session.
Well, let's take it more or less in chronological order in terms of the big items, starting with the private option. Took about, what, 10 days, if that long, 10 days to get that one tucked away.
That was
surprised a lot of people.
It pleased me, not only because we were able to resolve the issue, but we did it on the first vote, and it takes a 3/4 vote to accomplish that. And so I wanted to not have the drama and trauma on the private option issue that we've had previously. And again, I hadn't taken a position on it. I was fairly neutral on it, said we needed to study it, but once we announced what we wanted to do in our plan, which was to end the private option in 2016, the legislators came behind that, supported it, and we created the task force to look at the future of our Medicaid and our reform that we need to accomplish in this state. So it was that went not smoothly, I would say, but we came together to accomplish that for Arkansas.
Did it surprise you, sir, that you got it done so quickly?
Yes. You know, I'm an optimist that we can figure out the path forward. You listen to people, you work together, but the key probably was making sure the legislators and the leadership was included in the process as we developed that, as we communicated that, and they worked together very well. So it was an inclusive process, but it also took some leadership. My speech at UAMS was helpful to drive that forward, but it was also the Speaker, the President Pro Tem, as well as the majority leaders all came together and worked and really drove that.
It did not hurt, obviously, that you and a vast majority of the legislators are of the same party for the first time in some decades in Arkansas.
That's true.
And still some members, particularly some new ones, and some returning members were adamantly opposed to.
Well, it's been a divisive issue in our party, and I really applaud those that were open-minded in it. They listened to, all right, if we're going to end the private option, what's the best way to do that? And also, as I've said, we just don't end our concern for those 200,000 that are on the private option. There surely is an Arkansas way that we can make sure they have some access to health care in the future. And so there's a recognition and a compassion that was integrated into some very heartfelt positions that we need to, change course.
Looking forward, sir, a couple of years, what, if not the private option or something very much like it, then what? You've got, what, about 250,000 Arkansans now covered? Well,
that's right. We've got a lot of work ahead, and I think one of the first meetings of the task force will be coming up later this month. Senator Hendren is co-chairman of that with Representative Collins. It's a legislative committee. My Surgeon General, Gregory Bledsoe, is on there. And separately, I'm going to have a council of those interested, from the different associations and citizens that will help guide our thinking on that. So a lot of work to do. No decision has been made. We've got to figure it out. We're going to have to move quickly because this is something we need to address toward the end of this year, seek the waivers that we need from the federal government, from Secretary Burwell, and lay out our plan for next year.
Revenue stability, the state budget anyway, up, about $200 million, about $130 million from the last fiscal year, or from the current fiscal year, if I have the numbers right.
That's right. That's right.
You gave up, you and the General Assembly gave up a lot in general revenue. Did you give up too much? Are you concerned about the near term?
No, I think it's a conservative budget, both in terms of spending, but also in terms of making sure we don't create new programs that are unaffordable. And we've had some cuts from agencies, so it's a very conservative budget. If you go back into the session, of course, the first thing, even before the private option solution, we came and passed the income tax reduction, which I campaigned on. It's $100 million per year as it's fully implemented. And so it's really the largest income tax rate reduction in the history of Arkansas. And so even with that, we were able to balance the budget, and then the legislature came back and said we want a little bit more, had to negotiate with them. And so there is some pain in that budget, I think, as we all know. But we've had to fund education, meet the adequacy requirements there. We've had to look at a hole to fill in the Medicaid program, and it's a one-time funding of $70 million, I believe it is. But we've also balanced this with a 1% cut across the state agencies that are not higher ed. That's where you're going to have to tighten the belt some to accomplish our overall objectives. We've had people that pushed, and I supported addition to pre-K, and so there were some funds that were added for pre-K education toward the end that we had to make sure we could fund.
If there was some pain in the budget, there was also some sweetness, at least for upper income taxpayers, more than you wanted. Obviously you have to, well, you can accept that in terms of capital gains.
Sure, yeah. We first presented our income tax reduction, and we offset that with repealing part of the capital gains reduction that was accomplished in previous sessions. The legislature pushed back, and toward the end of the session we made that whole. We brought that back in, and we're going to finish that the next session. And so that's the give and take of the legislative session. It's not all about the executive branch, but it's about us working as a team and figuring out these solutions. And so did we give too much? I don't think so. I think in the end we were able to tighten the belt some, which was an expectation with a more conservative leaning legislature and governor. You want to tighten the belt. You want to have some cost controls, some executive branch solutions on regulatory form, but on a hiring freeze that we put into place. I think it's working very well. And I think over the longer term, we'll be able, hopefully, to save additional money.
On to 12, or the matter of the religious freedom thing, which pretty torturous 2 or 3 days there toward the end of the session. Everyone, I guess, was able to leave with something. The LGBT community, if only knowing that it had beaten back something that it truly found objectionable. My question, sir, is, has the state been damaged
I don't think so at all. Actually, I think how we handled this enhanced the businesses in this state. I think it enhanced religious freedom in this state. I think it showed that we want to be balanced and recognize the diversity of the workforce and the American culture. And so I think our standing really and how we handled this really made us look good in the world stage. And so it was not something that we expected to happen. This was something that was caught up in what happened in Indiana. It was a challenge for us, and we addressed that challenge. And again, I made a request of the General Assembly to go back and send me a different bill. That was not easy for them. It was not pleasant. They went back and in 30 hours sent back a new bill as I requested, and I think it is one that is the right framework, that is protects religious liberties, but also recognizes again the diversity of our workforce and sets a framework for these things to be resolved in the courts as needed.
What was the crucial point in getting it free? It was pretty much stuck in committee over on the Senate side, Senate Judiciary, and you asked that it be released.
That's true. And
what was the imperative there?
Well, it's a bill, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that has been passed in 20 states. It is intended to correct an imbalance in how we evaluate First Amendment cases. And so it appeared that it had broad support, it was reasonable, and it ought to have a vote on the floor. And Senator Burnett, as he has acknowledged, I met with him. I said this deserves a vote on the floor, and it was really 30 days later that he did change his vote and allow that to come forward out of committee. And then at that point, I think there was a recognition, well, there is some differences with the federal law. It doesn't mirror it the same as needed. We see the controversy in Indiana, and it caused us all to closer examine exactly where we are in Arkansas. And so because of that close scrutiny and examination, when it got to my desk, I recognized it did not fulfill my original goal of mirroring federal law.
Well, those complaints were heard early on, fairly early on, were they not, sir?
Well, you know, there's a lot of things going on in the legislative session. So, yes, there was some, I think it was Representative Bennett had raised the issue that this was not it was different than the federal bill in the session, but I was not aware of it at the time. And so we all didn't pay as close of attention as we should have, the national attention to it, the debate, the response of the state of Arkansas, the people, whether it's business or individuals, caused us to take a closer look at that. And the result was, I think, a recognition that this bill is good, it's better, it's preferable, and it is a tested framework. It has been tested in the federal court system. People are used to dealing with this and understand its repercussions. And so people felt more comfortable with that, and that's the reason that I think all the sides said this is a good solution for Arkansas. It's unique, it was supported, passed, and let's go on.
Are you still contemplating an executive order, sir, vis-a-vis, or that would cover state government in terms of LGBT?
My first preference was to have the revised legislation. I requested that. I was not sure how the legislature would respond to that request, and I said, you know, an executive order is another alternative to address this issue. The legislature obviously responded to my wish, gave me a revised bill that I signed and is now law, and so I think that resolves it. We can look at that down the road, but that was really the issue that my highest priority was given to me by the legislature, and I think that resolved it.
Would that move the state farther in terms of recognizing it, in terms of the world's eye, or at least the nation's eyes, on this particular issue? Would an executive order move that process along, underscore the appreciation of diversity or cultural difference?
Well, what I wanted to say, and it's important in whatever bill came out, that we in Arkansas intend to follow the federal civil rights law and our own civil rights law in the workplace and in employment decisions. We don't want to be recognized as a discriminatory state. And so that statement is important, and I think we with the recognition of the federal civil rights law still applicable, with our state civil rights laws in place, even though they do not cover everything, it still is protections to make sure that we want to have a workplace that recognizes people's individual convictions and beliefs and national origin and so forth.
One final question on that, because it comes up, and that's members of that community say they have absolutely no more protection today than they did last week.
Well, they have...
in terms of job protections, housing, so much of American life.
Because the bill that was passed, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, dealt with religious freedom. And that religious freedom applies to everyone in Arkansas, whatever their beliefs are. And so it provides a framework for the courts to decide the competing issues between equal protection and the First Amendment. And so it really did not deal with discrimination. It dealt with religious freedom, but it was a much more balanced law and one that people feel comfortable with to guide us into the future.
On to some viewer questions here, if we may, sir. And we'll begin with the very first Twitter question delivered to any of these broadcasts, and this comes from Mr. Mike Brinson. What can be done, sir, about nonprofits being free of paying or from paying sales tax, but churches being required to pay sales tax? Verbatim.
I'd have to talk to our Department of Finance to know for sure as to the applicability of that. It is my thinking that certain nonprofits, if they're 501c3, does have the ability to claim an exemption, but they have to get permission for that. And so we'd have to check the detail through that. And I would encourage the listener to call DF&A to get a very precise interpretation of that.
From Crawford County, sir, noting that you are a former head of the Drug Enforcement Administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and that we just concluded a session in which, once again, prison issues, the cost of imprisonment, the search for alternatives is high on the policy agenda. Have you considered, maybe in a subsequent session, asking the General Assembly to do more in decriminalizing certain substances?
No, I have not. I think it's important that we continue to have our current regime of illegal substances remain illegal. I think we have a society that is used to that. The debate, of course, is on marijuana. I think we're all watching Colorado. I'm not, and I realize there's a diversity of opinion on this, but in terms of our prison population, this is something we were able to accomplish this time in this session, where we just didn't build a new $100 million prison. We had a solution that involved expanding prison space, which costs about $50 million, which is going to relieve some of the overcrowding from our county jails. We're also going to invest about $14 million in more effective reentry programs and into alternative sentencing courts. And these would include drug treatment courts, veterans courts that might have some mental health issues, where we're not just about incarcerating, but it's also about, if there's an addiction problem, getting help for that person, holding them accountable. And so this should give us the balance that we need to make sure that the people we send to prison have a serious crime problem or a danger to our society, and not simply have an addiction problem. And so I think that gives us the balance, but it also hopefully will save us the money down the road.
Medicinal marijuana, has your thinking shifted?
My thinking has been fairly consistent on medicinal marijuana, and that is that we want to make sure people have their health needs met. And it is the medical community, I'm talking about the American Medical Association, generally determines what is good medicine. And thus far, they've indicated that good medicine, we have Marinol. That is the marijuana THC content that can be prescribed for medicinal purposes. And so we have that capability now through a prescription. People now think of medicinal marijuana in the smoking form. The American Medical Association keeps it in the dispensing Marinol form that can be prescribed. So that's my definition of medicinal marijuana, and that can be obtained through the prescription of a doctor.
While we're on criminal justice issues, Governor, a number of individuals have called in or written in regarding the case of an inmate now in Utah, Mr. Rolf Castell. Are you familiar with this case?
You know, I wasn't familiar with it until earlier today. I think there was an online mention of this. And
but
so
a number of viewers have called in regarding it.
And so I have to plead that I'm not familiar with that file. To my knowledge, there's nothing before me right now. So just like any other application, we just have to review that and the facts of the case to determine its merits.
Arkansas Board, I am told, has recommended release, but you haven't seen the file, so...
No, we've actually had a huge backlog of pardon and clemency applications that we've been working through, and but I've, to my knowledge, have not seen that one.
From Faulkner County, sir, we had some pretty dandy legislative salary increases. Your reaction to that?
Thank you very much. and I say that a little bit jokingly.
Well, I don't think it was direct. The question, I don't think, was directed.
Yeah, that's
as a
true.
matter of fact, it wasn't directed to the executive, but to the legislature.
Well, this was something that actually surprised me. It was an amendment that was on the ballot last year that set up an independent salary commission, and I thought it would go down in flames. And the people voted for that set up this mechanism, and I'm very grateful that the appointees to that salary commission fell in Governor Beebe's lap versus mine. And so I did not have to make the appointments to that commission, and I never testified before it. I let them do their work, and we had our own business. And they did, in fact, increase the legislative salaries, but they also increased the constitutional officer salaries, including the governor's. And so that's why I had reference to thank you. And I ran on the existing salary. I had no expectation of anything different, and that's what the salary commission, so I really provided, and I look at it down the road that hopefully it'll be balanced, that you know, it will make sure that the salary is not an impediment to good people going into public service, which I don't think it necessarily has been, but we want to be able to attract good people and not to require them to sacrifice their own personal businesses. Now I'm referring to the legislature. So I didn't have anything to do with that, but the commission did make the ruling on that, and that's now the law of the land.
Is the compensation package now, which the per diem plus the higher salaries, is that appropriate in your estimation? Is that justified?
You know, I don't have any complaints about it. It might have been, I might have come up with a different figure if I would have been on there, but quite frankly, I really have not concentrated on it that much because we had our hands full in the session. That's something that they worked on independently, and I had no influence over it. So I think it's something that we can watch. The salary's set. I think now you just have to watch, you know, the other aspects of what happens with the legislature in terms of any expense reimbursements and any, you know, per diems that might go along with that. So the salary's set. I think it's fair. I think you just have to watch the other side.
From Washington County, sir, you've been in office now 3 months, approximately. Your perspective on the swine operation overlooking or near the Buffalo River?
I actually had a good meeting with you know, some of the folks that are involved in that. I have a meeting coming up with the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, and that topic will be on our agenda. And what I'm very pleased with is that we're continuing the monitoring to protect the Buffalo River. The most important part of that equation is that we have to protect the Buffalo River. It is an icon to Arkansas. It is one of our natural jewels. We just lost Congressman Hammersmith within the last 10 days, and he's one of them that brought us that national treasure. And so we've got to preserve it. So we need to continue the testing of the watershed to make sure it is safe, to make sure that it is preserved and pristine. And then, you know, when it comes to the farm operation there, I think everyone acknowledges that the farmer properly followed all the rules, and so their hands are clean in that regard. But even notwithstanding that, we got to have good, strong regulations to make sure that proper notice requirements are out in the future so that everyone can have public notice and comment on it. Secondly, let's continue the monitoring, and whatever it takes, whatever it costs, let's preserve the Buffalo River.
Another Twitter question, it goes to criminal justice. In the last months of his administration, your predecessor caught a few people by surprise at a meeting when he announced that if presented, which he did not expect to be, but if presented with a bill to abolish the death penalty, he would sign it. Would you?
No, I would not. I wouldn't expect that in this legislature, but I've always supported the death penalty with the understanding that we have to have adequate protections to assure that due process is provided and that we don't have someone on death row that has any question about their innocence. And so once, you know, those assurances are there and that it is restricted to those extraordinarily heinous cases in which there's aggravating circumstances, then there are instances that we have to have a death penalty in our society. And so I continue to support the death penalty. It's not with any delight as governor. It's one of the heaviest responsibilities you can ever imagine. But we're not anywhere close, my understanding, for any execution in Arkansas. We did address that in the legislative session with, you know, additional legislative provisions to and direction for a lethal injection to see if that can pass constitutional muster, and that whether we can obtain the chemicals that are needed to carry that out.
Well, as it happens, late this afternoon, I and a great many of my colleagues were informed of a civil action brought in Pulaski Circuit late this afternoon by a longtime attorney, or an attorney who is a longtime opponent of death penalty, suggesting that the legislation just adopted by the General Assembly is in direct conflict with the consent agreement the state entered into a couple of years ago regarding the chemicals. Have you had a chance to review that?
Actually, I did take a look at part of some of the issues involved with that, and there was a consent decree. I was not a party to that consent decree. And I think there's an issue as to whether it was confined to that case or whether it had any broader application. But I do not consider myself bound by the consent decree that was entered some time ago. And, you know, the courts will review that issue. It's going to be well litigated. So, you know, I was aware that that lawsuit was filed today after I signed the legislation that provided new direction for the lethal injection here in Arkansas.
They wouldn't let me take the bar, so I didn't pass it, sir. But you don't feel legally bound by, as chief executive, you don't feel legally bound by the prior agreement, the consent order?
Well, that would be my contention, that that consent order, I looked at it and it looked applicable to one particular case.
All right.
I don't know that that had application for every subsequent administration. Every subsequent case that it would ever come up. And so, and I think the issue in that case was access to the information on the details of the lethal injection and the chemicals used.
Chemicals and the source.
Correct.
As I understand.
And part of the legislation that came before the General Assembly that I signed gave confidentiality for the source of those chemicals. And that is necessary in today's environment. And so I think it's a reasonable solution that other states have looked at. Obviously, there needs to be additional, reasonable protections to make sure that it is properly carried out and that standards are met and that, there are proper chemicals. I think there is a difference of viewpoint as to the applicability of the previous case.
One final one on the death penalty to follow up, sir, on the viewer's question. As a former prosecutor yourself, There have been numerous stories in recent years about individuals who have, after years of living in the shadow of the needle, exculpatory evidence has been revealed, or further investigation has cleared those individuals. Does that alter your thinking at all? The machinery of death, I think Justice Blackmun called it. He didn't want to tinker with it anymore.
Well, Justice Blackmun, who was a long-time opponent of the death penalty.
Well, he swung around to where right in the.
But in terms.
But he was, yes.
I would say that information. I recognize the Innocence Project. I recognize that we've had faulty procedures in our due process requirements, but also the DNA has taught us a lot about faulty eyewitness identification sometimes, and so it gives you a wake-up call that we have to make sure there's adequate representation for those charged with capital offenses, and that we have to review them carefully, both in terms of the courts, but also even when it comes to my desk. And so, yes, it gives you some pause, but it doesn't change the philosophical understanding that if you have someone that has met all of those standards, the jury's given the death penalty, they've received due process, it's been reviewed carefully under the most adequate standards, then that is a responsibility we have to carry out under our law in Arkansas.
From Faulkner County, sir, will drug testing recipients be worth it?
Will it be worth it?
Worth it, yeah.
I think it's important in terms of drug testing. The challenge is, one, making sure we have the right waivers from the federal government to accomplish it. And also, we can't afford to drug test everyone that might be on public assistance of some fashion. So it has to be based upon a for-cause or suspicion-based way of doing it. And there is some training requirements, but I'd like to see a pilot project on it. I think it is worthwhile doing a pilot project on it. And let's see if it can make a difference.
A great many calls, sir, and not a few from Pulaski County. The state is now the superintendent and the school board of the Little Rock School District. Can you give us your assessment of that situation and where that's headed from the state's perspective?
From the state's perspective, it's not a responsibility that I asked for as governor, that the state asked for, but it was given to the state under our Constitution and under the Lakeview decision by the Supreme Court. So it is ultimately the state's responsibility to make sure that every child in Arkansas gets a good education. Whenever there's found 6 schools in the Little Rock School District that are not performing academically, guess what? That responsibility falls on the state. And so you can't take it lightly, you can't dismiss it, you have to do your duty. And I'm glad Commissioner Johnny Key is on board, that will work very hard to make sure those children have a great education. I actually met with him today, starting to hear his ideas on that. I think he's making a presentation to the State Board of Education later this week. So we'll work through that. We're going to do everything that we can to improve education and have a good plan. From
Bradley County, sir, the Ten Commandments monument legislation, are we not letting ourselves in for an expensive litigation there?
It's possible. You know, it's actually on my desk right now. And, you know, in some ways there's nothing novel about the Ten Commandments. We're pretty much in agreement on those. And it's paid for with taxpayers' funds. There's one similar instance of this in Texas, and it was challenged in court. It was thrown out probably on a technicality that the person who filed suit against that monument did not have standing, so it's a little bit undetermined. But it seems to me to be a fairly reasonable path legally. What to me is important that we don't treat the Ten Commandments or any of our extraordinarily historic symbols as lightly. To me, it's a very serious thing, and I want it to have meaning. If that is done, where we have a monument that recognizes the role the Ten Commandments has played in our founding of our country and our historic documents and in the rule of law. And let me tell you, I uphold the rule of law to a high standard, and And I want that to elevate the rule of law. So to me, it's important to have meaning to the next generation, this generation. I hope that it's handled in that fashion.
Do I sense trace amounts of ambivalence in your answer, sir?
Well, I don't want to do something just because we want to make a statement. I want to do something because it has meaning and historic significance. And so I want to, and I believe that's the what the legislature, the General Assembly, was trying to convey and I think it was Ken Bragg really made some extraordinary comments on that impressed me about the historical significance of this to the rule of law in the United States of America, and that's the meaning to us. And it really goes back even further than that. So as long as it's in that context, I think it is good.
A number of questions, sir, from a number of counties regarding a matter that the General Assembly did not address, nor did the executive. You agreed that this needs to be considered later, and that's the matter of surface transport, a highway bill.
Yeah.
Do you have a timeline on that?
Well, we're going to create...
5 commissioners are hanging on your every word here.
Well, and many others are in the
Judges
economic development community. So we're going to act quickly. I've pledged to have a working group within the executive branch that will be broad-based, that will look at trying to bring parties together for a consensus on how we can better fund our highways. And higher education is an important part of that equation. They're going to be at the table. We're going to have our highway commissioners as well represented there, but we need to develop a consensus, and that's what we're going to work on. It's not going to be easy because you're dealing with taxes and highways and all the controversial topics, but I'm committed to bringing the parties together to try to work on that. Time frame for a solution, there's not any specific time frame other than I want to make sure that we start, we work together, we try to develop a consensus, and only bring it back to the table when we have that consensus.
A Sebastian County viewer, sir, suggests in a form of a question, that offenders are not serving enough time in state facilities, as opposed to the notion that they're spending too much, or that the sentences are too extreme, too severe.
Well, you have to probably look at that on a case-by-case basis, and you know, you can look at, first of all, the cases that go before the parole board. You know, they're serving you know, 1/3 of the sentence in many cases, and in some of the more severe cases they have to serve it all, and so it just depends upon the severity of the case. But the fact is, whether you think they're spending too less or too much of their sentence in prison, we do have to deal with a prison overcrowding circumstance, and we have right now we're expanding our prison space to make sure there's not pressure on the parole board to release somebody that should not be released. And we've actually given them more authority if they actually have a sense that they're a danger to the community. They don't have to release them. So they're given more authority to keep them longer if need be, and to make sure that society is protected.
From Stone and from Sevier and a number of White and other counties, and that's your thinking, sir, on exempting military retirees' pay.
Let me tell you,
didn't make it this time.
It didn't, but the military retirees, the veterans community did an extraordinary job of bringing that issue before the General Assembly and to my attention, and we helped all of our veterans, our retirees here, by lowering the income tax rate. Most of them are in that category of $20,000 to $75,000 in income, and they got a full percent reduction from 7% to 6% on the income tax. So we did flatten their rate, but they want a full exemption. It's going to have to be readdressed. We could not do that this session, but let me assure them that it's still on the table, and we've got to figure out a way that we can be competitive with our other states in terms of making Arkansas an attractive place for our military retirees to come and to continue to serve and support our economy.
Well, is the logic that it would attract, the argument that it would attract additional retirees who would then spend more in terms of sales taxes and whatever, does that appeal to you?
Yes, there is that logic, and it does appeal to me. And so, you know, if you can quantify...
Do you accept it? I guess I should refine the question.
Well, I accept the proposition that if we can attract military retirees here, then it's not an income loss to our state, it's not a revenue loss, it's a benefit to us. And so if it's hard to predict whether that happens or not, but I would be happy to start right now and say future retirees that come to our state that are attracted here can have the benefit of that income tax reduction, because that's a next plus for us.
From Cleveland County, sir, a viewer notes your reference earlier to Commissioner Key. Was it appropriate for the General Assembly to act as it did, at your request, to change the requirements for the state education director to make Senator Key eligible?
Yes. You know, I didn't ask it until I found my commissioner that I thought was just perfect for this position. His experience, his vision, his support, his willingness to work in a bipartisan way, his respect in the education community. And so it was easy with his level of experience to ask for an adjustment, and I think it was the right thing to do for him, and not just for him, but for the state of Arkansas.
From Izard County, sir, would you go over again, are we putting not enough emphasis on alternatives to incarceration to hold down prison inmate population and ADC costs?
Well, the alternatives to incarceration are generally considered our alternative sentencing courts, which are taking somebody who's a nonviolent offender who might have an addiction problem or a mental health problem, and saying, we're going to give you a sentence of, say, 1 year with strict accountability as an alternative to going to prison. And they have to have drug testing, they have to have mental health treatment, they have to meet with a judge once a month or even more frequently, and strict accountability. And if they fulfill that requirement, then that sentence many times is expunged from the record. I'm a believer in these alternative sentencing courts with strict requirements and accountability. And so, are we giving them enough attention? We're giving them more attention. The budget that we just passed and the laws we just passed increases the funding for those accountability courts and those alternative sentencing courts. So we're investing more than we've ever done. We want to give them a chance to work and increase their influence, and we want to make sure that is available for those who might qualify.
A continuing problem, sir, noted by viewers, presumably teachers in several counties, and that's teacher health insurance, essentially unaddressed in the session.
Well, it was addressed in a previous special session where we put in, I think, $40 million into the teachers' insurance fund.
And it continues to...
And I do believe that there was some policy changes that were recommended and passed also in those special sessions. And so it has been addressed, and it is much more stable, and they're going to continue to look at it. But I think we have made substantial progress with the teachers' insurance.
There was, along that line, there was a piece, I think, in the New York Times earlier, an op-ed piece, today, yesterday, within the last 3 days, that attributed the cost in soaring increase in the cost of higher education to an extraordinary, by the author's estimation, in the number of administrators in higher education. You had a chance to review that article, and you have any first thoughts on it?
I haven't had occasion to look at that, but efficiency in higher education is important to examine. And that's, you know, we fully funded higher education in the sense of we did not have a budget cut for higher education this last session. But there's pressure on them to be more efficient. We expect them to be more efficient and to examine whether it's the use of facilities or whether it is the administrative overhead costs.
Status of I-49, not quite your department, but certainly your neck of the woods.
Well, it's a great need. Can you imagine the economic boon to Arkansas if we could complete I-49? And it's going to take a lot of additional funding that we don't have right now. And there's two things that are needed, Steve. One is, as you mentioned, the Surface Transportation Act at the federal level has got to be stabilized. And I know that our federal congressmen are working very, very hard on that. But that has to be stabilized to give us the federal reserves and funding for those major projects. Secondly, we need to be able to do more as a state, and that's what we're going to look at in our task force, to be able to have more adequate funding of our state highway system as well.
It's a continuing or a persistent proposal before the General Assembly, and that's to take a bite out of, or to go into general revenue, divert some of the general revenue, sales tax, for example, automotive products, sales taxes, and so, and move that into the highway. Hasn't gone anywhere yet. Should that be on the table? Is that something the state will have to consider down the road? That's going to be your general revenue budget for the next 3 years.
Well, it should be, one, there should be multiple alternatives. And there's nationally, every state is looking at different funding mechanisms because you have more fuel-efficient cars. If you only look at fuel taxes, then how about an electric-motored car, electric-powered car, which are increasing? They don't buy, petrol. They don't buy gasoline, and so they would be untaxed. And so we have to have a better scheme of taxing those users of our highways. In terms of the general revenue side, I'm sure it will be discussed in the task force. It's gotten a lot of support actually in the General Assembly in a gradual fashion, but I'm still hesitant about it. I want to make sure that we can hold our traditional state services harmless if we're going to take a look at that.
How frozen is the freeze on state hiring in Ashley? Or this is from Ashley County, I'm sorry. The freeze that you imposed.
How solid is that?
How frozen is frozen?
Well, it's enough that I wouldn't want to skate on that ice. And so, it's a great management tool, and so we put this in place so that if there is a new position or someone wants to fill a position that's been frozen, then they have to ask permission, they have to make their case that this is a legitimate need. And for example, if it hasn't been filled in a year, we ask the question, well, if the agency has not filled this position in a year, we think you can continue to do without that. Or there might be enhanced need that we will say you have an exception, you can go ahead and fill that position. So it's a flexible freeze, but I sure wouldn't skate on that ice.
Governor from Craig had a follow-up on the teacher insurance thing. Have you any thoughts on whether that system, the teacher insurance system should be merged with like the state employees retirement system?
We didn't. There was some, I think, some adjustments that will help the teachers' insurance continue to be solvent in the future and minimize the increases. You've got to continue to look at that in terms of its long-term stability. I've not pushed looking at merging it with the state employees system, but I have pushed an examination of whether some of that should be returned to the local school districts. That has not been particularly well received with our legislators, being concerned about some of the smaller school districts. And so I think we ought to continue to look at those options, but right now I think it's stabilized, and we hope that there will not be significant increases down the road that will cause more dramatic changes.
Again, a Twitter question, sort of the source I don't know, but it goes to higher education, noting our chat earlier about the cost of higher education, tuition going up. Is the state, in a sense, eating its seed corn by not putting more into higher lottery scholarships, for example? The amounts going down and the criteria going up a little bit. Should we be putting more into higher education to counter, at least for the near term, these increases in tuition?
Well, I mean, first of all, I took $2 million of a rainy day fund to put in the academic scholarships, not the lottery scholarship, but those students that have scored 32 on the ACT, and thank goodness in Arkansas we've got more scoring 32 than ever before. But so the scholarship was underfunded. I didn't want to lose those to out of state. We wanted to keep them right here, and so we put $2 million to make sure those scholarships were funded. In terms of the lottery scholarships, it's been a great tool for us, enhancing availability and access to higher education, but it's been constrained in the revenue stream. This last legislative session put a premium on making sure that it was available. The longer you stay and are retained and make the grade in college, then that will increase in an amount. So it's minimal when you start, but it increases. And that's probably what you need to do when you have a constrained budget and limited resources. What that does is make sure that those that go to college are incentivized to stay because they're going to get more help as they go through. And secondly, it's probably going to give students serious thought as to is that my best option? Is that what I should be doing? Or am I a marginal student? Maybe I should go to a two-year college or a technical school and see if I can make the grade and then transfer into the four-year college. So I think that what we've done legislatively is a proper balance. But we've got to do something to make sure that it's available and we don't outprice the students' ability to pay.
Well, the two programs that you cited, governor scholarships and the lottery, that's fine for them, but that leaves the vast majority of the college-educated or students seeking post-secondary education in Arkansas. That doesn't cover them. And they still have to confront the cost of rising tuition.
Sure, and it never covers it all. So yes, it is a challenge that we face. That's why I like the concept and the availability of eVersity, which is another alternative for getting a degree. I like the pressure that we can put on our universities to offer more low-cost degrees. In Texas, Governor Perry challenged his university presidents to come up with a $10,000 degree program. They couldn't do it for every program, but they came up with a couple of them. We want to keep that pressure on higher ed. And the universities also, they're developing their own revenue streams through the research institutions. You know, our two-year colleges are an affordable education, and it's a good place to start. And once you make the grade there, then you got the availability of our four-year colleges. So there are alternatives out there. We just want to make sure the pressure on efficiency exists within our higher education.
Again, from Twitter, sir, you have a new Secretary of Agriculture. What direction is he going to take? And also, would you put the weight of your office behind in urging Congress and the administration to go ahead with the Cuba initiative?
I do think Cuba, when it comes to marketing our agricultural products, the Cuba market needs to be open. And we depend upon our exports. Cuba, I've supported the embargo when I was in Congress. I've continued to support the embargo. But as governor, whenever you look at our opportunities for trade, I think that while we need to have pressure put on and it's still the Castro regime. I think you have to continue to put the pressure on them to reform their system, to empty their prisons out there. But when it comes to our agricultural products, to me, that's not driving their economy forward. It's feeding a hungry population, and it's opening up markets for our rice, our soybeans, and our other agricultural products.
Finally, sir, from Faulkner, I think we have time for one more. The changes that were made to the tax code, were they skewed unnecessarily toward the middle class and the the super wealthy in Arkansas when we couldn't get an EITC expansion through?
The focus was for those making between $20,000 and $75,000 in income. Could we help more of those in making below $20,000? Sure. But I think that was what was needed to drive our economy forward, to give that middle class income tax break. Down the road, we need to continue the debate as to we help all of our citizens. You know, those that are making less than $20,000, you know, for the first time really had the benefit of the private option, which was health care coverage for those making that modest amount. But we need to continue to look at ways. I'd like to see tax reductions more across the board, but we had to drive that middle income tax cut. I think it was the right thing to do this session. And with that, Governor, we are out of time. We thank you for the previous 60 minutes of yours. We didn't talk about computer science. It was a great success story in this session as well. Well, let's do the squeeze real quick. I think I can buy us 30 seconds. Go ahead. Well, what a great success story. My initiative, computer science, computer coding, offered in every high school in Arkansas. Next session, free of charge, digitally if need be. We've got a $5 million budget that we're going to really try to incentivize that program so we can be a leader in computer science education in Arkansas. All right, and with that, we are out of time. Mr. Hutchinson, thank you again. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Arkansans Ask Governor Asa Hutchinson is underwritten by the Arkansas State Employees Association, Incorporated, an organization of state employees working toward the betterment of state government.